Dan Rottenberg, the author of The Outsider, Albert M. Greenfield, and the Fall of the Protestant Establishment. Well, like most authors, I've always had several books on the back burner. One, for years, was a book about how Jews have changed business in America and vice versa. Another was a book about the decline of the Protestant establishment in America. I came across Albert M. Greenfield and I realized this man ties into both of those themes, and that's why I was really interested in him. He was the quintessential Russian immigrant hustler who terrified the Protestant establishment of Philadelphia. They tried to shut him down in 1930. They thought they had. He came back and he shut many of them down. Well, I think one thing certainly that surprised me was discovering that the perceptions that Jews had of Gentiles and the perception that Gentiles had of Jews really were really not accurate. That they were both fallible human beings, that the Protestant establishment of Philadelphia really had gone through much the same experience that the immigrants of Philadelphia did, except that they went through it about 200 or 300 years earlier. What surprised me, I guess, was that I couldn't quite get a handle on, do I like this man or don't I like him? There's a lot of things about Greenfield that I really liked and that I found I had in common with him. Tremendous optimist, had no use for people who whined and complained. I'm pretty much the same way. He had very little empathy for people who had problems. He said, you know, take your problems somewhere else. On the other hand, I think he did a lot of things that were not quite ethical. He had his own narrative of his life that a lot of it was total nonsense. But this is basically what I had to do as the writer, sift out the myth from the facts. Greenfield was Jewish, but he really broke all boundaries and all rules. His basic mantra was, I can define myself as whatever I want. Sometimes he defined himself as Jewish, sometimes he thought himself he was the second coming of Benjamin Franklin. So, you know, he was all over the place. Yes, I think when you come right down to it, he was not really that concerned about making money, about power. He really just loved to play the game. He lost a fortune twice in his life and came back, and each time he really sort of you almost got the sense that he enjoyed the comeback. It was much more fun. He once said, I would rather fall off the highest rung than never climb the ladder. In business, I would say he built up a huge empire, including department store chains up and down the East Coast. He built some of the major buildings in Philadelphia that still stand to this day, including the Ben Franklin Hotel, for example. The building I'm in right now, which is now called the Philadelphia Building. For years it was the Bankers Securities Building, named for his company. But really, his business empire, I think, collapsed shortly after he died. It was largely a one-man band, and his legacy really lies elsewhere. Greatest disaster was probably the failure of Bankers Trust Company in 1930, his venture into banking. He just assumed he was smarter than everybody else, that he could succeed at anything he put his hand to. Banking turned out to be something very different from real estate. Real estate, man, the biggest asset is your optimism and your ability to inspire confidence in your investors or in your tenants or whatever. With a banker, your biggest asset is really your reputation for prudence and caution and reliability. Totally different things. I would say his greatest legacy probably is the message that his life transmits to people, that you as a private, ordinary citizen can really exert tremendous influence on your community, your country, if you really want to. The idea that we ought to be a little more optimistic about the future. We ought to be a little more accepting of change. That you can make your own identity, whatever you want it to be, and collectively we can make this community and this world a different place if we want to. Also, I think his legacy is the importance of immigrants in our society. You know, every generation there's a fear of immigrants and a feeling that, well, immigrants don't really know what America is about. Greenfield had the opposite idea. He said immigrants really appreciate America more than anybody else does.